The biggest question a modern mixed martial arts fan in the present time right now would ask, why did they want Jon Jones to fight Stipe Miocic so badly? After all, Stipe is coming off of 4 losses. That's an exaggeration, obviously. He hasn't. Probably 1 loss, and that was in a championship fight. Nonetheless, a loss. He's not coming off of a win, and then he comes in here as fighting the greatest of all time in Jon Jones. And the linear path of Jon Jones' career was nothing more than just an absolute destruction of one competitor after another. In other words, dominant wins after title defenses, so on and so forth, is the trajectory of Jon Jones' entire career span. But now, they want him to fight Stipe and not Tom Aspinall. Why? Did anybody ever ask themselves why is that? It doesn't seem to have a lot of motivation in the part of the UFC to want to make that fight. I think I know why. I may give you a couple of theories as to what is plausible here. And the one that I can come up with is the simple fact that they don't want Jon Jones to beat Tom Aspinall only for him to leave in the way that George St. Pierre left after he had choked out Michael Bisping. You see, after years of a dominant run from GSP at the 170 division, his biggest criticism was that he was never moving up in a weight class, which at the time, by the way, above him was Anderson Silva. Arguably, at that time, and maybe even till now, one of the greatest of all times. And he was never able to get that fight. That was one criticism. The other criticism is the fact that GSP never really finished guys at the highest level of his championship runs. Decision after decision. Carlos Condit, decision. Nate Diaz, decision. Lawler, decision. I'm sorry, not Lawler. Johnny Hendricks, but Johnny Hendricks did go to a decision with Robbie Lawler, and by the time Robbie Lawler was already the 170 champ, GSP was already out, and he was already replaced by, guess what, a guy like Robbie Lawler, who is a longtime veteran and not somebody that was fresh and new like Rory McDonald, which at the time, if you guys remembered, they tried to make Rory McDonald out to be the next GSP. And then in came the fight that he had that really gave him long damaging effects from the Robbie Lawler fight. And he ended up losing, not getting a championship out of it. Nonetheless, still a great career either way. But that was one of the biggest criticisms of GSP. He wasn't finishing these guys, wasn't finishing Johnny Hendricks, wasn't finishing John Fitch, wasn't finishing Dan Hardy, even though he looked like he was very close to doing so in an armbar, to which Dan Hardy just came out and showed his grits and determination and being able to show his submission defense as well, which is in nobody's surprise the reason why Dan Hardy is one of the biggest analysts in the game right now, and his breakdowns that he does so eloquently. All translated from his fighting days, now being able to look at it from the outside and give you an overall view of what he sees in the highest levels of martial arts. So they don't want Tom Aspinall to lose to Jon Jones and only for him to leave, because guess what? They already have this mess with the linear title with Francis Ngannou. Now, what's the problem here? The problem is that Francis Ngannou left the company as the champion. So now we don't really have a real legitimate champion. If Jon Jones was to leave the game undefeated, basically having all his faculties on him and then being able to have the legacy to run along with it, it's a great marketing tool for the UFC, because they don't ever have to worry about the risk that they have to face with the outcome of either a Tom Aspinall win or a Jon Jones win. And let me explain what I mean by that. If Tom Aspinall was to win, it would ruin the UFC's entire catalog of what they know Jon Jones to be. In other words, they could do a lot with Jon Jones being, let's say, the linear champion or going out on top, because obviously he's not the linear champion right now. If we can just be honest, it's Francis Ngannou. He is the linear champion that is going into a boxing ring, fighting guys trying to get a world title as a linear champion in the MMA world, now trying to get titles in the boxing world. That's Francis Ngannou in a nutshell. But Jon Jones leaving with a win is an even bigger stain for the company of the UFC. And let me explain why. Because now you can't market Tom Aspinall the way that he deserves to be marketed. It's going to be very difficult to do that. Because, let's face it, right now, Tom versus everybody, he beats everybody. But that's the guy that you're going to have as your world champion. A guy who is basically second best to the guy that just decided to hang it all up. Don't forget to like and subscribe as I break down to you the reasons of why these things are the way that they are in a heavyweight division right now, and why they really want the Stipe versus Jon Jones fight. Because it's a no-risk fight. I think that it's literally both of their last fights together. I think this is going to be the last one for Stipe. It's a great way for him to go out with a big payday, because in all honesty, he really doesn't care about anything else. He has a great job as a fireman, and he's already cemented his legacy, at least in his own mind, of being a former world champion. And what more do you want out of that? How much more do you want to take out of this game? And with Jon Jones, it really is his last fight, because he just wants that one top heavyweight in his resume, and Stipe just happens to be the guy that had defended the heavyweight championship more times than anybody else. And by the way, it's a very small number. We're talking about 3, not 93 or 33 or any of these big football numbers. We're talking about 3. That is Stipe Miocic in a nutshell as the heavyweight champion. The most defended UFC heavyweight champion of all time. And Jon Jones wants that in his resume regardless of the outcomes and the situation that had come before Stipe, which was pretty much a big downfall, getting knocked out by Francis Ngannou out of all people. A life-changing knockout. And all they want is for Jon Jones to leave with his legacy cemented, but also have Tom Aspinall's legacy cemented as somebody who, by the way, is the British champion in a time where, let's say, if Usyk was to be defeated by Tyson Fury, you now have 2 British heavyweight undisputed champions in 2 of the most mainstream fighting sports. And that is a great way for the UFC to spin off that as a great marketing tool. Not as somebody like Jon Jones, who just beat the guy that is the number 2 in the world. So they spin this narrative that none of this really matters with him having to fight Tom Aspinall, when every fan wants it. And I'm going to tell you why, because I think you know what I know if I think you're an intelligent MMA fan, which is that we see that Tom has a very short span in his fight average, okay, because he finishes his opponent straight away. And not only that, he's got great submission, great takedown defense. So wherever this fight is going to take, it's going to be a very difficult run for Jon Jones to compete with somebody with having those types of statistics on his side. But Jon Jones also has the stats on his side. And that means only one thing. They can't let him leave with the belt. because they've done it too many times with GSP. They've done it too many times with Khabib. They've done it too many times with anybody else that you could think of that left as a champion and left the division in a disarray of confusion in the competitive architecture. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you can keep me in a competitive hierarchy of the YouTube's algorithm, inshallah. Also share, don't forget to tell a friend, and you know the rest. I will be back with more content in the coming days, weeks, and all throughout the times, inshallah.